जिंदा खुदा से दिल जो लगाते तो खूब था।
जिंदा खुदा से दिल जो लगाते तो खूब था।
मुर्दा बुतों से जान, मुर्दा बुतों से जान छुड़ाते तो खूब था।
Right, so I think let's begin. Can I request Zisha and Nasir for Talat, please?
Assalamu alaikum. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. واصبر نفسك مع الذين يدعون ربهم بالغداة والعشي يريدون وجهه ولا تعد عيناك عنهم تريد زينة الحياة الدنيا ولا تطع من أغفلنا قلبه عن ذكرنا واتبع هواه وكان أمره فروطا. The verses that have been recited before you are from Surah Qaf, verse 29. The translation is as follows: I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed. In the name of Allah, the gracious merciful. And keep thyself attached to those who call on the Lord morning and evening, seeking his pleasure, and let not thy eyes pass beyond them, seeking the adornment of the life of the world. And obey not him whose heart we have made heedless of our remembrance, and who follows his evil inclinations, and his case exceeds all bounds. Jazakallah.
Good. Jazakallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا هو وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Right, so today, keeping on the theme of Ramadan, so we'll look at the importance of a spiritual retreat in faith. So, first of all, Hazrat Aisha anha relates that the Holy Prophet Muhammad used to practice etikaf in the last 10 days of Ramadan till he died, and then his wives used to practice etikaf after him. So, what is this etikaf? Etikaf is a spiritual retreat where a Muslim will remain in the mosque for devotion to God, cutting themselves off from the world. A person will spend their time devoted to meditation, prayers, and supplications to get closer to Allah. For Muslims, this was the practice of the Holy Prophet Muhammad and a means for anyone to develop their relationship with God. As Ramadan is a blessed time, therefore, following the practice of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, this is a very good time to do this. It's related from Abu Sa'id al-Khudri that the Holy Prophet Muhammad used to practice etikaf in the middle 10 days of Ramadan. And once he stayed in etikaf till the night of the 21st. And it was in the night, in the morning of which he used to come out of his etikaf. The Holy Prophet Muhammad said, whoever was in etikaf with me should stay in etikaf for the last 10 days, as I was informed on the date of the night of Qadr, but I have been caused to forget it. In the dream, I saw myself prostrating in mud and water in the morning of that night. So look for it in the last 10 nights and in the odd ones of them. Now it rained that night, and the roof of the mosque dribbled as it was made of leaf stalks of date palms. I saw in my own eyes the marks of mud and water on the forehead of the Holy Prophet, i.e. in the morning of the 21st. So here we see that the Holy Prophet he used to do the etikaf in the middle of Ramadan, but then he got some guidance from Allah that you should seek out Laylatul Qadr, and Laylatul Qadr would be in the last 10 nights on one of the odd nights. Now here it's saying that it happened on the 21st, but of course it can be happening on any of those odd nights, 21st, 23rd, 25th, 27th, 29th. And so because this now was guidance from Allah to seek it out Laylatul Qadr, so therefore he moved the etikaf from the middle 10 days to the last 10 days. Oh, okay, I've just explained it. So we see from this hadith that the Holy Prophet ﷺ used to sit etikaf during the 10 middle days, but then Allah revealed to him about Laylatul Qadr, I just said all this, the night of destiny, and that this would be the last 10 nights and on an odd night. Therefore, he started the practice of etikaf during the last 10 nights only. Now, the people who sit etikaf, they are known as mutakif, one who sits etikaf, and they are allowed to erect their tents in the mosque so that they can be secluded from each other and use it for meditation, reflection, and soul searching. So this is the practice, and as you can see in the picture, how they would erect these sort of tents, and so it isolates each other, and so you can spend your time in the tent or you can spend time outside the tent. But the general idea is that you should be cut off from other people. It's related from Hazrat Aisha, radiallahu anha. The Holy Prophet intended to practice etikaf, and when he reached a place where he intended to perform etikaf, he saw some tents, the tents of Aisha, Hafsa, and Zainab. So he said, "Do you consider that they intended to do righteousness by doing this?" And then he went away and did not perform etikaf in Ramadan, but performed it in the month of Sawal for 10 days. Now, from this hadith, we can see that they used to erect tents when they wanted to perform etikaf. You can perform actually etikaf anytime during the year. It's just seclusion. And as you see here, the Holy Prophet spent 10 days in the month of Sawal as well. And it can be at any length of time as well. It doesn't have to be 10 days. But the etikaf in Ramadan, that has to be for 10 days. So you can't do just a few days in Ramadan. Now, whilst we also participate in this spiritual devotion, in this particular case, the Holy Prophet, he saw that 3 of his wives had already set up these tents waiting to do the etikaf. And he became annoyed with them because they didn't ask his permission first. So women can do etikaf. They can also do etikaf in their own homes, wherever they are doing place of prayers. Usually these days with Ahmadi mosques, because we have separate mosques for women, so they can do it in their side where the women's mosque is. But in the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, this wasn't the case. There was only one mosque, and the women there set up the tents in the same place where the men was. The practice of devotion away from others is therefore a very good way to develop one's spirituality, to spend time in the presence of Allah, and to cut oneself off from the worldly life, domestic connections, and the desires of the flesh, and instead devote one's whole time and energy to the constant remembrance of Allah. During the period of etikaf, one can get very close to Allah and get dreams, visions, etc. So it's a very blessed time, which they have made the sacrifice of their time for this short period of meditation, reflection, and soul searching. And so any interaction with them should be brief and really religious. Preferably, it's best not to approach them while they're in etikaf, but if you have to, then be quick. And like I say, it should be religious things, it shouldn't be worldly things or anything like this. It was the practice of the Holy Prophet Muhammad before Islam that he would go to the cave Hira for meditation and devotion and cut himself off from the world. He would take some food and spend a few days at the cave before returning home, and he continued this practice for many years until the angel Jibril appeared to him. So this was the early practice of the Holy Prophet. So he desired to have this seclusion, and he would do, like I say, meditation and prayers in the cave here, all by himself for a few days, go home, spend some time with his family, and go back again, and so on and so forth. In fact, this has been the practice of all religions, and everyone really needs some time for moral and spiritual training, which in turn will leave a lasting impact on them. Now, the Sufis do a spiritual practice called Chilla, and Chilla means 40, and is a practice found mostly in India and Persian traditions, where you spend 40 days in devotion and seclusion, fasting or having little food. The Chilla is commonly performed in the solitary cell or room called a Chilla Khana. Now, of course, we're familiar with this word because Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad alayhi salam also did a chilla. So here he spent 40 days of prayers in seclusion at a place called Osherpa. And this is the room that he stayed in. Of course, it's been done up now, but that was originally the room where he stayed. So whilst he was there for 40 days, he implored God for an important, powerful sign. And during this period, of course, he received the divine sign of the promised son. The practice of khalwa, seclusion or separation, is regularly followed by the Sufis, with the permission and supervision of a Sufi authority. The Sufis base the signing of 40 days of khalwa period of the 40 days Allah had appointed for Moses as a fasting period before speaking to him, as mentioned in different chapters of the Quran. So as the Holy Quran relates that Moses spent 40 days with Allah in the Mount Sinai. So likewise, this is where they get their 40 days from. In Christianity, in Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 to 11, it relates that Jesus, alayhi salam, was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting for 40 days and 40 nights, he was very hungry. And the tempter came to him and said, "If you are the Son of God, then tell these stones to become bread." Jesus answered, "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. And he said that if you are the Son of God, then throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. Jesus answered Satan by saying that it is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And he said, all this I will give you if you will bow down and worship me. Jesus told Satan that away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. Then the devil left him and the angels came and attended him. Now, spiritual retreats have many various themes that reinforce the Christian values, principles, and scriptural understanding. They may be individual or involve a group. Retreats for Christian youth groups are common, as are getaways for Sunday school classes, men and women biblical study groups, and Christian school field trips. Common locations for Christian retreats include churches and retreat centers. Retreat centers typically offer the overnight accommodations such as a cabin or dormitory, meals, activities, meeting rooms, and chapel spaces. So these are some of the practices that Christians do. Another practice that they do is the monasteries. So the Christian monasticism is the devotion practice of Christians who live ascetic and typically clustered lives that are dedicated to Christian worship. Those living the monastic life are known as monks or for the men and nuns for the women. Now, the word monk actually means alone, and so this is where it's come from. Now, monks actually, in the beginning, they didn't live in monasteries at first. Rather, they began by living alone, as the word monos might suggest. But as more people took on the lives of monks living alone in the wilderness, so they started to come together, and the monks formed communities to further the ability to observe the ascetic life. So in the monastery, generally, they've cut themselves off from the world, and they don't get married, and they just live in the monastery, and obviously work the land and things like this, prayers, and it's a spiritual retreat of a different sort. Now, in Judaism, we see that Hazrat Moses salam went up Mount Sinai for 40 days, where he spent the time alone in seclusion with Allah. It was at this time that he was blessed with communion with Allah, and Allah bestowed upon him the 10 Commandments and other teachings. Now, when Hazrat Moses salam returned to his people, he found that whilst he was away, they had taken the golden calf for worship. In his anger, he broke those 10 commandments that God gave him. Allah was very displeased with the Jews, and Hazrat Moses salam went up for another 40 days to plead forgiveness from Allah. So this again shows the 40 days of seclusion of Moses. But there's also the prophet Elijah. He had confronted the king Ahab and the queen Jezebel over the worship of the idol Baal. He warned them of the punishment of Allah, but they rejected his warning. The people experienced a great suffering. He returned to them again and challenged the priests, and he won. And then Queen Jezebel was angered and vowed to execute the prophet Elijah. And so the prophet Elijah salam, spent some time in the wilderness and was very hungry and tired. While sleeping, an angel came and provided him with some food and drink and prepared him for his journey ahead. We see then another Jewish prophet, the John the Baptist, Yahya salam. He began his preaching also in the wilderness in Judea, along the Jordan River. So this shows that the practice of the prophets was to spend some time alone with their God. But despite these incidences of Jewish prophets seeking solitude, Judaism is like Islam and doesn't encourage solitary practices and instead focuses on communal activities. It objects to lifelong celibacy. So Judaism generally does not encourage physical withdrawing from society, the monks and things like this. It encourages instead the pursuit of justice and mercy through social action. So monasteries, this is also forbidden in Islam. It's also forbidden in Judaism. They don't look at this practice. But Judaism does, whilst it doesn't encourage monastic celibacy, it does encourage expressing devotion, dedication as a spiritual technique. So spending some time with God, this is encouraged. So Judaism regards procreation instead of celibacy, and the education of children by the family unit instead of this monastery and the cutting yourself off. To be positive, mitzvahs, commandments to be observed. It also insists that public worship is the ideal form of Jewish worship. So it doesn't believe in this separate worship, but doing it in public. And it makes the presence of a miyan, 10 worshippers, the condition of many full public worship usages in order to assert their directive somewhat forcefully. So this is what they try to do. Instead of having separate worship, they get 10 people together, which they call a miyan, and they will worship together. Now, concerning Buddhism, the Buddha is also known to have spent time in the wilderness. He lived in Nepal and India around the 5th to 4th century before before Church of England. What was it? Before Christ, anyway. After several years of struggle and meditation and keeping away from everything, he was now ready to move on and informed others of his worship and teachings. So the earliest Buddhist texts depict the Buddha as promoting the life of the homeless and celibate or beggar as the ideal way of life for the practice of the path. He taught that beggars were supposed to give up all possessions and to own just a begging bowl and 3 robes. Now, often you see the Hare Krishnas in the UK and in Pakistan and in the East, they have these monks here. Then this is what they do: just have the 3 robes and begging bowls that they are supported by others. So, as part of the Buddhist monastic discipline, they were also supposed to rely on the wider lay community. Lay community means other people, not priests and monks, for the basic necessities, mainly food, clothing, and lodging. The Buddhist teachings on monastic discipline were preserved in the various Vinaya collections of the different early schools. Buddhist monasteries, monastics, which include both monks and nuns, were supposed to beg for their food, were not allowed to store up food or eat after noon, and they were not allowed to use gold, silver, or any valuables. Now, this is a picture of the Dalai Lama and a Buddhist monk. Now, spiritual retreats allow time for reflection, prayer, or meditation. They're considered essential in Buddhism, having been a common practice since the Vasa, or rainy season retreat, which was established by the founder of Buddhism, Gautama Buddha. In Zen Buddhism, retreats are known as zesshin. Spiritual retreat can be different for different religious communities. Spiritual retreats are an integral part of many Hindu, Jewish, Buddhist, Christian, and Sufi communities. In Hinduism and Buddhism, meditative retreats are seen by some as an intimate way of deepening powers of concentration and insight. In Hinduism, meditation and devotion are both used to practice divine worship with the same ultimate aim, which is liberation from the cycle of births and death. In regular practice, it is not uncommon for a Hindu to practice both the methods to purify his mind and body and reach the transcendental state of self-absorption or oneness with the inner self. Ascetic people practice abstention from carnal pleasures and worldly enjoyment to purify their minds and body. They restrain their bodies and minds and withdraw from the worldly life to control their thoughts, desires, and emotions, and stabilize their mind in the contemplation of identity or in peace and calmness of mind. There are different approaches to practices as asceticism in various Hindu sects. The most well-known is yogi, which practices yoga. In the past, the practice of asceticism was confined mostly to men. However, currently, women also participate in ascetic practices and women-based ascetic organizations exist within and outside of India. In modern yoga, a retreat is often a recreational holiday where everyday business is left for a few days, a weekend retreat, up to weeks. The goal is to let go of the daily stress and problems by doing asanas, body posture, rather than pure meditation. So yoga has now become a very popular way of, well, the proper way is to improve meditation, and obviously is also a way, I don't know, of keeping fit and doing different styles. Right, so that's the talk on the different spiritual retreats. So has anybody got any questions they want to ask about this?
Robbie, there's a question or two if I can ask on the chat.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So the first one is so it's about itikaf. So it asks I can you do itikaf on just some days rather than the complete whole 10 days?
Right, if you're doing it in Ramadan, then no, you should do it for 10 days. That should be your intention. I know some students and things like that, people, they can't do the whole 10 days. But the month of Ramadan, the etikaf during that time, then that should be for 10 days. That should be your intention. Obviously, sometimes people go in for doing 10 days, but for some reason they're not able to do it. But your intention should be for 10 days. So those people that don't do it for 10 days, this is not regarded as the proper etikaf of Ramadan. But as I said, you can do etikaf at any time. So any time during the year you can do it, and that can be for any length of time. I remember when I was in Pakistan, when the first year I went to Pakistan, because Joseph Solana was stopped, and Joseph Solana used to be over the Christmas period. So I did etikaf for 3 days during that period. And it rained the first day, and it became very, very, very cold, and there was no way of get myself warm. So although it was only for 3 days, I was quite happy to come out of that etikaf at that time. So that's, like I say, just a normal etikaf. But when we talk about Ramadan etikaf, then that should be for 10 days, yes.
Jazakallah. There's another question. It says about Lailatul Qadr. Why is it on why is it on the odd days? That we see basically.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is it's not so much Laylatul Qadr, it's seeking the Laylatul Qadr. That's what Allah wants to see, that you should be, during this last 10 days, tightening your waist belt and spending more time in worship. And obviously, Allah will speak to you at any time. You can get dreams and visions and things like that at any point. So you don't need a special day to do that. But what Allah wants to see is that you're doing this process of seeking it out. So you're spending more time in trying to get close to God, to try to get some visions or revelations or something like this. Now, through my experience, because I've done etikaf many, many times, I found that some people have received it on one of the odd days, and someone else has received it on another of the different odd days. So it seems then to me, my understanding is that it can be different for everyone. And of course, when we think about it, I mean, we talk about the angel Jibril coming down on the last third of the night. But the last third is at different times throughout the world. So what is angel Jibril coming last third throughout? So whole 24 hours he's coming down. Because obviously we've got different time scales and things like that, and different days. What could be a day at our time would be a different day in a different part of the world. So again, what do you mean by the 21st? When it could be a different day for someone else. So we shouldn't get too hanged up on this. It's more looking or seeking out Laylatul Qadr and trying to develop that relationship with God, and spending this last 10 days spending more time in your prayers, more time pondering over the Holy Quran and doing zikrullah and things like that. That's what Allah's trying to guide you here. And as a reward for making that devotion, then maybe Allah will bless you with his closeness, getting some revelations, dreams, visions, or whatever. So that's the main understanding that I understand from this.
Jazakallah. There isn't any other questions at the moment on the chat for now. And if anyone would like to, have any questions, you could simply raise your hand as well and ask your question, or you can also, as I said, you could send it on the chat as well.
I mean, has anybody done etikaf? I know I know Dr. Ashraf, he done it with me in Birmingham. So,
I think Toby Sab has his hand up.
yes, Toby, sir, yes.
Assalamu alaikum, Muhtaram Maulana Saab. Yeah, Jazakallah for very insightful presentation. Maulana Saab, my question will be on the side where you mentioned, which we read in the Bible, that the Satan tempted Jesus several times, going on the mountains and coming down and running here. What is the real essence of this? Did actually Satan manage to move Jesus left to right, or what was it, Maulana Saab?
We know that Shaitan has got no control over anybody. This is very clear in the Holy Quran, that the only thing that Shaitan has got is suggestion, and to try to tease you, to try to tempt you to do things, but he's got no power over you. So this spiritual retreat, whether there was actually happened, or whether Shaitan or whoever was trying to tempt Jesus, we don't know, because obviously we're not sure on what is actual correct and what isn't. But the main message coming from that is that Jesus was completely devoted to God, and he wouldn't be tempted by anything, and wouldn't be tempted by worldly things or anything like that. And the same thing, of course, happened with the Holy Prophet Muhammad. We don't associate it with Shaitan, but you can call the Quraysh leaders who tried to tempt him and offer him whatever he wanted as a Shaitan, if you like. So this is a constant battle, which again, this is the beauty of Ramadan, where the Shaitan is locked up, because you're doing everything for Allah. So you're getting control of yourself, and you should not be being tempted by any satanic thoughts or anything like that. So whether this actually happened or not, we don't know. But it's, again, getting the message that although they're trying to tempt Jesus, it failed, and he was completely devoted to God. And obviously, the main thing we're looking at is spending that time alone with Allah. And that, I think, is very, very important. You need that time. That's why I do etikaf so often. I think you need that retreat away from the world, just to spend some time with Allah. Right, Dr. Ashraf, you got your hand up, so yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum, Salvi Saab.
Welcome,
What's your advice about you doing etikaf at home during the pandemic?
I mean, this is a suggestion, and yes, of course you can do, because nowadays the home has become the mosque as such, and of course the whole world is a mosque anyway. For women, they do etikaf. They can do etikaf at home because that's the normal place of prayer. But during this epidemic, of course, the mosque is not allowed to do etikaf. We're not allowed to do etikaf at the mosque. So there's no alternative now. So if you want to, you can do it at home. And again, it's just a question of cutting yourself off, having a room or a place where you are alone and not being disturbed by what's happening around you. And obviously spending all your time as you would done etikaf in the mosque. So yes, it's one way. And as long as, again, you're not being tempted by the TV or by the computers, things like that, it's one way of doing etikaf. You can do etikaf anywhere, obviously, as I said. It's just the main thing is having that alone time with God. That's the most important thing. And obviously, if you're not doing etikaf, at least you can be getting up earlier and earlier at night and spending that time trying to get close to God. So, Dr. Ashraf, you want to give some of your experience of etikaf?
Alhamdulillah, I've been doing itikaf for many years, and it's spiritually it's very uplifting, and one is able to fix his mind and learn the art of how to do the dua, and you spend your time in devotion 10 days, and you read the Holy Quran, try to understand the meanings and the commentary of the Holy Quran, and read various books on hadith, on the promised Messiah, and many other religious books, and that keeps you updated. I mean, Alhamdulillah, because last year and this year I sit at home because of the pandemic, just to keep my habits going, and I'm finding it very rewarding, and Alhamdulillah, it's going very well so far.
Yeah, I remember when I went to Scotland. I was supposed to go to Scotland the year before I went there. The three Scottish converts, they sat etikaf, and they didn't know, so they thought that they're not allowed to speak to anyone. And apparently, for about 3 or 4 days, they had no contact with anybody until people realised that they're not speaking, and so on and so forth. And so then they told them that no, this is not where you can speak. But they said that time, that first few days, was wonderful, and they really benefited from not having any interaction with anybody. But of course, you can meet people, but generally, if you can isolate yourself as much as possible and just spend your time devoting to God, that's the best thing to do. So has anybody else got any questions or any experience they want to about itikaf or anything? Or even questions on fasting? Okay, I'll try to show different places, different religions, what they do. No other religion does etikaf like we do. But as we saw that even the Holy Prophet, he used to spend that alone time with God, and he felt that was a need. And often we see people going off into the wilderness or cave or something like this, and just having that time alone, just like Dr. Ashraf is trying to have that time alone in his house. It is very important, I think. I mean, you get so lost in the world and so many activities are happening, and just to have that time where you don't have to worry about anything else. Obviously, when I do etikaf, I have a problem because obviously I'm a missionary, I'm meant to be serving, so I still need the prayers and stuff, and that's why I always do etikaf in the mosque that I serve. But the main thing is having that alone time, and like as Dr. Ashraf said, it gives you a good opportunity to really go deep into the Holy Quran, thinking about the meanings and reading other books. Normally I bring quite a number of books with me and get through a lot of books, which I don't normally find time these days because of so much other things going on. In this picture in front of you on the screen, that is when I did etikaf in the Hartlepool Mosque with my son on my right side in white shirt. Bilal often does it as well. I don't know if he did it that particular year, and maybe Ali, maybe all four of us did the etikaf. But whenever I can, I try to do etikaf. But as Dr. Ashraf said, I haven't been able to do it for the last few years as well, because of obviously things have changed. But so if there's no other questions, then we'll leave it there. So anybody else got anything they want to say, or is that it? Okay, then fine. Then please join me in silent prayer. Bismillah. Ameen. Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.